Mr. Musa Panya is a legal practitioner and is also a member coalition of FCT indigenous groups. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Well, you have seen the screening happening so far. We do know that when the names were mentioned, when the 43 names were mentioned, one of the things we heard, one of the protests we heard was from here, right here in the FCT, the local population here saying that they have been missed out. There's nobody that has been appointed from the FCT. Can you shed a little more light on why that is important?
The Constitution under Section 1473 obligates the President to appoint at least an indigene of each state of the Federation as a minister. Now there are, as we know, 36 states. However, Section 299 of the same Constitution says when you're going to apply the Constitution in the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, you must consider FCT as a state. So there's been this ongoing quarrel as to whether FCT is a state. Now, this issue was settled in 2009 by a full court of the Court of Appeal in Okoyede versus FCT, where 5 justices of the Court of Appeal unanimously interpreted Section 299 to mean that in law, FCT is a state. Now, based on that, the implication therefore means that the minimum number of ministerial nominees is not 36, but 37. So based on this precedent, we had reasons to now go to court in 2015, 20th February. Filed a petition. Then President Goodluck Jonathan was president, and filed a petition against them in the Federal High Court, insisting that indeed, hitherto all cabinets have not been legal because there's one person still missing, and that's the nominee from FCT. We didn't succeed at the Federal High Court. But then I went on appeal to the Court of Appeal. And on 15 January 2018, now 1 year, 7 months ago, the Court of Appeal unanimously adopted Okoyede versus FCT and said that indeed FCT is a state in law. And so when you consider this, when you juxtapose Section 1473, Section 299, and Section 14, which is a part of the Chapter 2, Fundamental Principles of State Policy and Directives. Section 14.3 says that when you constitute the government of the Federation, you must do a balanced act, that it must reflect, that's where the federal character principle comes from. It must reflect regional balance, state balance, and so on, ethnic balance, so that no particular person or area will dominate the government. So otherwise called federal character principle. Now, under federal character principle, a schedule to the law, 2014, the Federal Character Act, 2004, sorry, as amended. Under Schedule A, the definition of who an indigene of Abuja is prescribed there. And that section says that any person born of parentage who were resident in Abuja as of 26th February 1976 and have continued to remain resident in Abuja is an indigene of the Federal Capital Territory. So there are indigenes. Again, this is the Constitution. FCT has indigenes. 9 tribes. FCT initially, as of 1976, there were 9 indigenous tribes that constituted FCT. Now, So far, the local population is now over 2 million, going to 2.5 million. Now, the voices of these people is not in the cabinet. Every other state has at least one person. In this dispensation, President Buhari has gone back to past practice of appointing up to 43 ministers, which is beyond the 36. However, the fact that FCT is still missing makes the cabinet to be inaugurated illegal.
Yeah, but there's some people who argue, and this is not to take anything from your arguments now. Some people who say that the FCT is indeed a special state. It is not a state like any other state in that it doesn't have a governor. It has, as if we all agree that the FCT is a state from all the legal background that you have set down. They will say that it doesn't have a governor. It has only one senator representing the entire FCT. I think it has about 2 or 3 members for the House of Representatives. And shouldn't that constitute representation, so to speak, enough for the FCT? Especially when you look at the fact that this is the heart of the country, and that there is no way that, things will happen in other parts of the country that the FCT would not be taken care of first.
Yeah, well, that is exactly the problem, isn't it? Because that position is actually a fallacy. Why do I say that? The founders of Abuja, General Gowon and Murtala, when they conceived of Abuja, they said that, and in Murtala's broadcast of 3rd February 1976, when he announced the creation of the FCT, he did say that it will be a place for all Nigerians, a home for all Nigerians, the symbol of their unity. And that FCT will not belong to any state of the Federation. It will, a law will be inaugurated or promulgated to vest absolute ownership of FCT in the federal government. The next day, 4th February 1976, General Murtala signed Decree No. 6, 1976, creating Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. Section 1(3) of that decree said that the ownership and title of the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, shall vest absolutely in the federal government of Nigeria. So therefore, it will no longer be claimed by the former states of Niger, Kwara, and Plateau then. So that is where this whole thing, what was envisioned was good. FCT was initially not supposed to be a state. But Section 1(3) was now smuggled into 1979 Constitution as Section 2564, which said, but in this case, with a slight modification, and it says that the ownership of Federal Capital Territory is vested in the federal government of Nigeria. So therefore, it therefore means that the FCT belongs to the whole country. The problem is that when Murtala made that broadcast, he said all the inhabitants in that territory that's to be known as FCT Abuja were going to be resettled, relocated out of the state territory and resettled at government expense. That was the premise. That was the vision. That was the reason Murtala, ahead of time, put Section 1(3) in Decree No. 6, so that indeed only federal government will own FCT. But here we are, 76 to now, 43 years, thereabouts, 42 years, and 85% of the population and land of Abuja has still not been resettled. The compensation due and payable to these people has still not been paid. They have not been resettled out of the territory so that Abuja can become vacant or virgin and left for all Nigerians. This is the problem. Why did this happen? Because 8 days after Murtala created FCT or signed the law, on 13th February 1976, Murtala was killed. Abuja, the way it was conceived and legislated, died that day with Murtala. So what has come out of all of this is a ghost. Because that is not how FCT was initially meant to be.
So don't you think then that the fight is being misconstrued or is being misdirected, so to speak? Because if you say that what we have now is not what was envisaged, shouldn't the battle be about what we ought to have and what is due to the indigents of Abuja, to the original indigents of Abuja, not in terms of asking for ministers, because some people will say that is not going to do anything for the good of the original indigents. There will be very little that they can do. So let's paint a scenario, for instance. Assuming a minister is indeed nominated from amongst the 9 ethnic groups which are indigenous to the Federal Capital, or which were originally indigenous to the Federal Capital Territory, there is no guarantee that that minister is going to be overseeing the Federal Capital Territory. How do you then hope that it's going to affect the good, the general good of the Federal Capital Territory?
Now, the Constitution is the Constitution. The problem is 1979 Constitution came into force, and now we're dealing with 1999 Constitution. I've already highlighted some of the provisions of the Constitution that relate with Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. We had nothing to do with putting those provisions in the Constitution, in spite of what Abuja was initially envisaged to be. This is the problem. The problem is that until and unless, when there's compulsory acquisition of land under the Constitution, in 1976 when Abuja was acquired, is the 1963 Republican Constitution that was in force. The unsuspended part of it, Section 30, said that when you acquire land compulsorily, you must pay adequate compensation before title now passes. That's the law. You cannot have title and ownership of any private land or any land that is compulsorily acquired without first paying compensation. Section 30 is now Section 44 of the 1999 Constitution. It says that whenever you acquire land compulsorily, the government, it must pay prompt compensation. Promptly. This is the problem. The compensation that was due to the FCT indigenous inhabitants as of 4th February 1976, when FCT was promulgated into existence by law, has still not been paid. And yet, the title and ownership was decreed. This is the problem.
The point I'm asking, the question I'm asking you is, you know, how does appointing a minister from amongst the indigents of the nominees, the indigents of the Federal Capital Territory, make or, you know, change the situation about paying prompt compensation?
I understand what you mean. All we're asking for is that we also must have a voice in the federal cabinet, like every other state. The Constitution has guaranteed that. The Court of Appeal judgment has guaranteed that. We're not saying that the person to be appointed from Abuja Indigents as a minister representing FCT is to be the minister of FCT. That's not what we're saying. All we're saying is that we must have our chair and our voice in the federal cabinet.
But don't you think that there is another way through this? In the sense that if the National Assembly functions as the State House of Assembly for the FCT, shouldn't you be lobbying lawmakers who, as a whole now, represent the FCT and sit as its own State House of Assembly, legislate for it? Shouldn't you lobby them to see how this can maybe be inserted into law, or, you know, perhaps passed as a resolution, or maybe through some soft power, impress it upon the executive arm of government to do something about it?
that has been repeatedly ongoing for a long time. Senator Philip Aduda, the senator representing FCT, did raise a motion of a point of order when the ministerial list was read. And he pointed it out that the National Assembly is the legislature or legislator for FCT, and that his constituents are really agitating that the parliament for FCT, the National Assembly, must step in and do something about it. Having said that, let's correct one notion. The Constitution is very clear that the president is the governor of FCT, but he has delegated those powers to the minister of FCT. So the minister of FCT executes on behalf of the president. So we have a governor. It's just that he's called minister of FCT. So we also have a legislature, and that is both houses of the National Assembly. This is the problem.
It's a problem?
It is, because every other state assembly has limited number of representatives. In FCT's case, the whole nation is legislating for us. This is the problem. And
it's a problem?
Yes, because
some people say that they would have thought that that would be a favor.
360 representatives in the House of Representatives and 109 senators, all combined to make laws for FCT.
And the entire country, of course.
Yes, but when out of those numbers, only 3 are from FCT. The senator, and 2 House reps. So you have the whole nation legislating for Abuja, whereas the 36 states have their states legislating for their states.
Some people would say that ought not to be a problem, because ideally, if one would assume that, considering the fact that the president would live largely in the Federal Capital Territory, who is supposed to be the governor of the Federal Capital Territory, and the legislators, who should largely spend a huge part of their time here. Lots of them have their homes here, the families, some of them are here. One would think that the first thing they would want to do is have self-preservation, preserve the Federal Capital Territory first, even before things trickle down, it would seem, to other places.
That's exactly it. You're just emphasizing my point.
Isn't that the situation? Isn't that the case? Because some people argue, I mean, there are areas of this country that say that a lot of the wealth that belongs to their own part of the country has been brought to the Federal Capital Territory. And that's how they feel about it.
Every state, every 36 states, each one has representatives in the National Assembly. They are here to protect and legislate and agitate for the interests of their states. So
they don't have more than 3 senators.
Each state has 3.
Yes, each state has 3.
Yeah,
the FCT
only 1
has 1.
Yes, this is the point I'm making. Their primary responsibility is to represent and protect the interests of their people, coming back from the 36 states, their constituencies, not for FCT. This is the problem.
Yeah, but it is taken for granted that they will also want to protect the interests of the FCT.
That is exactly the problem. Why should it be taken for granted? Why should it be taken for granted? But having said that, what we need to know really is that it's no longer a matter of choice, because the Court of Appeal judgment has interpreted and has said it clearly, and as of today, that Court of Appeal judgment is law, is the Constitution. That the Federal Cabinet must consist of a minimum of 36 plus FCT 37. So people don't want to hear it.
There's a judgment in that regard?
Yes. This is what I told you. I went to court. I went to Court of Appeal.
And it has not been appealed? It
has not been appealed. And the time to appeal it is been foreclosed because the judgment has been executed. You cannot appeal an executed judgment. In November of 26 last year, I issued what we call Form 48 on the president. The judgment was served on the president, by the way, on 22nd March 2018. The judgment was 15 January. So barely 3 months later, a certified true copy of the judgment was served on the president. This is 1 year, 7 months now. And in November 26 last year, I now served what you call a Form 48. That is a post-judgment process that executes a judgment. All right? So it's been executed. So the federal government's right of appeal is foreclosed forever.
Okay. So let me, while that we're, I'm sure those who should listen to this are listening, but let me quickly ask your take, your general take on the screening so far and the quality of the nominees from the questions that have been posed to them.
I think most of the agitation are genuine. Ministerial screening, the Constitution envisages that the president is his discretion, is his privilege to nominate whoever he wants as minister. However, the Constitution wants a balancing act. It now made those appointments subject to the confirmation of the Senate. Why? Because the Senate represents the people, the voice of the people generally. So ministerial screening is a job interview. Why? Because even the biodata and the CVs of the ministers are sent to the Senate ahead of time. So all these nominees are coming for a job interview. You don't apply for a job you don't know that you're going to do. This is the problem. So all this taking of bow and going, it's doing great injustice to the spirit of the Constitution. And also the fact that the 43 names were sent with that portfolio. How is Nigerian going to know now that the person who is being screened is going to be competent to hold the eventual portfolio? You can't speculate. You can't speculate ahead of time that, okay, there are several lawyers nominees in that list. You know, Malami, even Bello Mohammed, and so many. We don't know who's going to be the Attorney General. So how would you know, how would Nigerians be convinced that, because any of those lawyers can be posted there. So the point being made now is that it's a job interview. How do we know you're qualified for the job?
It's definitely a very valid question to ask, and I'm sure that those who should be answering the question, will be listening.
We like, and it has been uploaded, what Governor Erufai has done in Kaduna State. He sent a list of commissioners with portfolio.
And we hope that, the example we were taking from that. We have to thank you so much for coming on Sunrise Daily this morning. Mr. Musa Panya is a legal practitioner. He's also a member coalition of FCT indigenous groups, and he's been speaking to us on the ministerial nominees and the screening process so far.